welcome back to another episode of Impossible Equals Impossible. My name is Paul Deitch, and this show has been such an incredible gift for me. I co created it with my co host because there's so many times when you see people on social media, right? A lot of incredible, inspiring stories, but people don't talk about a lot of the challenges that they went through, right? That's why it's called impossible to equals impossible. And I always felt that it was really important to share with people, especially right now on LinkedIn, right, where a lot of people are experiencing layoffs and challenges, bring you people who have been maybe in the place that you are and can show you through their stories and insights and lessons that they've learned that you can chase your potential instead of accepting your reality. And I'm so excited to be here today. We have another incredible guest here. Hopefully people are able to tune in the audience. We had some issues last week. Oh, there we are, Amber. So good to see you, my friend. Yeah, last week was a very interesting experience. I've done over 200 events on LinkedIn, and that was the first time that this show didn't connect. But that being said, let's hop into it because I cannot wait for this conversation. My guest this week is Christina Whiteley. Christina is a serial entrepreneur who was born and raised in Canada, and she currently resides in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Christina's true passion lies in helping entrepreneurs live a life beyond the balance that most people seek, empowering them to make more money and build purpose centered businesses that inspire and fulfill them while creating the freedom they deserve to live life on their terms. And she does this through a multitude of ways through her podcast, Freedom Motivated. She has a mastermind called the Six Figure Profit Plan, and she has a global social media following. She's pretty much everywhere on social media. And I want to share this quote because I feel like it's a really powerful way to get this conversation started. Be bold, be brave, be disruptive. You are capable of things far beyond your wildest dreams if you just have the courage to go for it. And in many instances, that was the exact reason why I created Impossible Equals Impossible. So, with no further ado, Elizabeth, so good to see you. I'm here to bring on my good friend, Christina Whiteley. Christina,
Hi.
so good to see you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I know that LinkedIn for you is kind of a new platform per se. So we're so grateful to have you here. And the first place I want to start is I didn't actually realize how incredible your story was because you and I met almost a year ago actually in Cabo. And
Yeah.
it was only after then I was really blown away in how in many instances our stories have been very similar. So the first place that I want to start is obviously you're doing so many incredible things now, right? I saw you recently just had a book that was a bestseller, right?
We were number two, right behind Trent Shelton, but I did have a bestseller before. This was gonna be number two, but we're okay.
Yeah, I know you just created an incredible book, and let's start this conversation with really who is Christina, and like how did you grow up in a short kind of synopsis, like how did you get to kind of where you're at now? I know it's a long conversation, but
Well, first of all, Paul, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for introducing me to your audience. And yes, LinkedIn is a new platform for me. I'm a lot more familiar with other social media platforms, but it's one of great value. There are so many incredible humans here, and I'm just really grateful to be here today. So thank you. I'm a small town girl. I grew up in a town of about 15,000 people on the west coast of Canada. You could only get to that town by ferry. So it was almost like an island, but it was on the mainland. Everybody knows everybody's business. And, it was really interesting going through school. I was bullied from like grade two on, and I didn't realize until late into my adulthood. I'm almost 40 now. I didn't realize until like my mid 30s that there was a piece of me that I always thought, well, what's wrong with me? Why don't people like me? I don't understand. Like I'm nice, I'm good to people. Like I just don't understand why they don't like me. And I've learned over this time that there's a light inside of some of us, right? There's a light that shines very, very brightly, and that intimidates people. And so I had a really hard time going through school. I was made fun of a lot, and I didn't think I was very smart. People would make comments and say, "You're not very smart," or, "You should know this by now," or, even teachers, right? I had that conversation this morning with a mentor, actually. And as time went on, I just knew inside of me that I was made for more. There was a calling inside of me. I was raised by a really great family, but blue collar family, middle class family. We never went without, but we also didn't have a lot of extras, like we didn't take family holidays every year. We didn't do all that stuff together. And so I had this idea that you go to school, you get good grades, then you go to university and you get a job with a good paying job, you pay your bills. Hopefully you meet a partner, you have kids, you buy a house, all the rest, right? Like there's this a series of events that just is how your life unfolds. And so I never really dreamed that big. I just thought I just got to get a good job to pay my bills, right? Like maybe I can make enough money to go travel, maybe I can make enough money, to travel as a family, all that kind of stuff. But my goals were really, really small because I didn't have a lot of belief. I didn't have a lot of confidence. And it wasn't until I actually went to university for 5 years for music and dropped out 2 classes shy of my degree because I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm never going to make any money this way. I didn't have the confidence to pursue that, even though it was something that I was really passionate about. And so I became a hairstylist. I thought, okay, I can have kids. I can work from home. I make my own hours. Like, this sounds pretty good. And in that process, I was introduced at the salon that I worked at before I owned my own salon. I was introduced to this woman who was a color rep, and she came in and did teaching for us. Like we would have classes every single Monday as junior stylist, and she did this class called "How to Become $100,000 Stylist," and my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, "What? We can make $100,000 being a hairstylist? Like you've got to be like my mind was blown, right?" And what did she do? She reverse engineered the goals. She took, this is how much you charge for cut and highlights. This is how many you need to do every single day if you work 5 days a week. And then this is the outcome. This is the commission that you make. And so I worked really hard at that for about 5 years and then realized, wait a second. This is going to take a really long time because I had a manager that was not as supportive as I needed to move forward and to make more money and to become a senior stylist there. So I realized very quickly that my cap was $36,000 a year. And I couldn't pay my rent on that. I was dodging my landlord and paying rent late almost every month. I was at the place that I got another job, and I was literally putting $2 worth of gas in my car to get to and from work because it's all that I had. Once my car ran out of gas, and it was the most mortifying thing that I've ever been through, being like, I don't even know how I'm going to get out of this. I mismanaged money. I didn't have a strong financial background. I had a ton of debt. And one day I realized, something's got to change. I've got to do something different than what I'm doing right now. Very lucky to meet my husband along the way, who helped me see things a little bit differently and wholeheartedly supported me. And that's kind of when things turned around and I started, my true entrepreneurship, because I was born an entrepreneur. Like I was, making up paper routes when I couldn't get the right paper route in my area. And I was, selling whatever I could. I was making candles and selling them in my little red wagon. Like I was doing like whatever I could because that was just innately in me.
Yeah.
So this gave me the opportunity to kind of start something of my own. And very quickly I realized that I could, 3-4x my income if I started working for myself. And then it just grew from there.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating too, as you're sharing that story, is like pretty similar for me, right? Like I was born and raised in Hawaii, like small little island, and I grew up like pretty unconventionally. But it's interesting that you talk about how you were kind of a born entrepreneur, because when I joined 10x last year, I kind of had this idea that I've really always been 10x my entire life,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if I would really call myself an entrepreneur. I would say for me, I learned through my banking career. Like I spent probably a good maybe 6, 7 years like in corporate, like working for somebody else. And I remember just seeing how like, people would be there for like 30, 40 years. And it's just like, it's almost like your life is kind of like on like autopilot, basically. You're doing the same thing over and over again. You don't really have any type of awareness. And it's fascinating because of like the interaction where you and I met, obviously, versus like hearing that story. You must be like kind of blown away, like, wow, like I've come so far. But yet there's also like that really fine line, because I'm sure you and I both know that we haven't even scratched like the surface of our potential. So it's
Yeah.
always fascinating to just reflect and be like, man, I started here. And where I'm curious for you, right? You talked about being an entrepreneur, and I know you and I are both big on the personal development space. We're constantly like sharing things with one another. I'm curious for you, who has been the most impactful kind of mentor or person like in your life? I'm sure there's a few, but like if you really had to pick one, and what was the most valuable lesson that they taught you?
Whew, man, if I just had to pick one, you know what? I'm not going to talk about my later life. I'm going to talk about my early life, because I didn't have a ton of mentorship in my early life. And I also want to address this comment that says that Elizabeth said supportive husbands can be helpful. Yes, they can be really helpful. It was more like a wake up call for me, Elizabeth, because he's like, what do you mean you're $30,000 in debt after school? What do you mean you have credit card debt? What do you mean, like, he was like blown away because he didn't have any of that. And I was like, oh my God, I need to become somebody of value to keep this guy around, or else he's just going to get rid of me. Right. So I was highly motivated. But you know what? I'm going to tell you, and he would probably not realize this, because I've worked with Danelle Delgado like you have. I worked with Kelly Roach. I've worked with Ray Higdon. I've worked with some incredible mentors in my life that have just like changed who I am at my core. But I will tell you the story. There's this one gentleman, and as funny as it sounds, he was a firefighter. When I was in high school in grade 12, I did my grade 12 local pageant, the Miss Powell River pageant. Okay. And he was the first person. They had the firefighters were new as sponsors that year. And so they had a lot of the girls that wanted to be represented by the firefighters. And so I went into an interview, and they ended up picking me out of 15 other girls to represent the firefighters in Powell River. And I remember, like, for the first time, somebody other than my parents, like
Mm.
somebody actually believed in me enough to support me and push me through. To this day, I honor him. To this day, if I can give back to charity, I give back to the BC Burn Fund, because they allowed me to be a spokesperson for them. But it was him that showed me there was more value in me than I even saw in myself. And then when
Mm.
I went through that pageant, I learned a lot in pageants, by the way, and I had a good, bad, ugly, whatever you want to call it. But I didn't win. I didn't win. I came first runner up, and I learned about politics. I learned about, the good, the bad, the ugly of what that looks like. And he called me 2 months later, and I was so devastated. I worked so hard. I was like, I deserve this. Like, I know I deserve this.
Mm.
And I didn't win. And he called me 2 months later, and he said, we're sending you to Miss BC. I was like, you can't even do that. I didn't win. He's like, yeah, we can. And we're doing it. You're going in 2 months. And I was like, what? And so he sent me to Miss BC. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, I can't even believe this is happening. And it went on, and they ended up sponsoring me and sending me to Miss Teen Canada as well. And they were like the most supportive group of men that I had to hold my own in front of for, very good training for my dating life later on, and like how to handle myself in front of people that are going to heckle you all the time. Right. But it was him that changed the game for me and realized that there was more value. And to be perfectly blunt and honest, that's part of why I'm head over heels in love with my husband, is because
Mm.
I dated all these people, and not all these people, but I dated a few people, right? Had different relationships, right? But Ryan was the first person that he looked at me and he believed in me and he supported me wholeheartedly. He's like, whatever you put your mind to, you're going to be able to accomplish. And
Mm.
to this day, and this was like 3 weeks in, my mom called and said, how do you like this guy? And I'm like, I don't know. I kind of think he's the one. Like, there's nothing I don't like about him. I said, he treats me like a princess, but he calls me on my shit. And that is
Mm.
something that I was looking for. I was looking for somebody that would help me become a better human, but also loved me enough to be kind enough to build me up. And that's always been Ryan. And so I feel really, really blessed to have a couple of people in my life that really supported me in the times that I needed it the most. But Terry Peters, man, he went on to become the chief in Powell River, and he actually just retired this year. I go for coffee with him when I go back home just to say thank you. Every time I have an opportunity to thank him, I do, because my life wouldn't be the same if I didn't have
Yeah.
him as a mentor at that age, at that young age, that was so impressionable.
That that's so funny that you share that story, because I was looking back on my Facebook memories, and exactly like I think a little over a year ago I became a keynote speaker, and I talked everything that you said. I talked about, like, that's what my aunt kind of was for me, and she's always
Mm,
been kind of my number one fan. And it's so incredible to like hear that, though, because it just goes to show that we don't really know the impact that we have on people's lives, right?
yeah.
Like we do like the smallest things, and I see this all the time on like LinkedIn with like creators, right? Because when we became entrepreneurs, I don't know about you, but for me, one of the things that I heard all the time was, "Oh, I don't have any money." People always think like they needed money to support you. And then I was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 but I didn't ask you for money." And they're like, "Well, how can I support you?" I was like, "You can react on my posts, like share my posts, like tag people, right? That maybe I could help." And I remember like people would do that, and I always remember like the first person, right? Like whenever you do like a venture and something that's like, oh, I really don't, you think it's gonna work, but like you really don't know until it works. And those are the people that like you remember, and it's crazy. I have a list that I make of like every person who's like helped me on my journey. So it's like once you make it, it's like you give back like
Yeah.
crazy, like Danelle teaches us. And this is why I love these conversations, because as you know, like I watch a ton of podcasts, like I know how people interview, but it's these really like intricate stories about people that you really kind of get to know them. And I know for you probably have some people watching this. I bet they probably didn't know that story about you, right? Like,
Probably not.
and it's like that, what we don't realize is it's those stories that kind of like we think are like, I don't know if people would like that, are the ones that like end up hitting home, because everybody has like that kind of one person, or if you don't, hopefully you find it in a mentor. But oh, we got more people that hopped in. Who's here? So Elizabeth's here. Amber, so good to see you. Donald Cohen, he reminds me of my grandpa, so I call him
Oh, I love
Grandpa
it.
Don. Yeah. And oh, if you haven't connected with Leslie, Christina, you definitely have to connect with her. She's one of the most brilliant people I've met. She says we can't read the label from inside the wine bottle. We need acknowledgement of our gifts from people we trust. Yeah,
Amen.
so true. And yeah, and one of the things that's so fascinating too is when I met you almost a year ago, I met like pretty much your entire family. It was like you, Ryan, and Izzy, and I was kind of bummed because I was like, darn, Izzy, I'm not the youngest one here anymore. But it's been, I want to say for me, like especially as a younger person, like it's been so or we know age is a number, but like being in my generation, right? Like you don't see a lot of people, and especially like how you brought Izzy with you and you bring her as you travel the world, and she really gets to experience a lot of these things. I really think that more people need to be doing that. So it's like give them something that they can like actually look forward to, right? I remember I would always hear like, oh, you have to kind of like see it till you believe it, right? And I believe there's truth in that. Like faith is definitely a key aspect, but it's like once you can see and like feel and experience that like what you really want is real, it changes the entire perspective. And it's fascinating. I didn't know that you had a previous best-selling book, but what's really unique is I'm curious about this whole mastermind thing, right? Like obviously you and I are in a mastermind now. How did kind of the six-figure profit plan mastermind even start, and like how incredible has the experience been for you?
Man, and so I'll answer that question, but I also want to address, how lucky we are, and blessed we are to be able to take our daughter with us and show her these things and give her these life experiences. Leaving a country and her going to school in a completely different country and learning another language, traveling the world. Like I want to explode her mind so that she's willing to work hard for things and be able to create them. And like we just bought a turnkey business, a cash business, And the coolest thing about it is like she gets to see us build it from the ground up. She gets to see what it takes to build that business.
That's
And I
awesome.
think, you know, if you ask me what started the six-figure profit plan, I'm like, Danelle made me do it. You know, I always wanted to help people, and I was involved in network marketing. I am, you know, I have a business as well that I run behind the scenes in affiliate marketing. And as much as I enjoy that, it was something that expanded my growth, my business knowledge,
Mm,
my leadership knowledge. All of these key pieces came into it, expanded how much I thought I could actually make, right? All of this massive expansion happened in that space. And it takes a lot to lead a volunteer army. So you learn how to do that. You learn how to appeal to people and how to influence and how to give and give and give with value. And so I got to the place where I really enjoyed that business, but to me it was the basics, and it was teaching people the basics over and over and over and over again. And some people love that. Some people love, you know, it being a very, very simple system, and all you do is the same thing over and over again. But for me as an entrepreneur, I
you
always
got to
need to
do
be
different.
challenged. Yeah,
Yeah.
I needed something bigger. I needed something to work forward to, or look forward to. I needed something that would like get me out of bed in the morning, right? And I realized that working with higher level people who are self-motivated, right? They have some self-leadership, and they have good ideas, but they don't know how to bring them together. And I started to develop like a keen sense of how to create more income for people, how to help them build brands, how to create other streams of income. And I was like, if I'm not helping people with this and I'm only helping myself, that's really, really selfish. So I think Danelle gave us, I think she told us to go make 100 grand in 30 days in our mastermind. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? She's like, oh, you just break it down like this and you just go out and do this. And so really it pushed me enough to start. It pushed
Mm,
me enough to talk to people and to go to the people that I knew I could help and say, hey, I'd like to do this with you, or I'd like to show you how, and I'd like you to have some skin in the game so you actually show up and you're accountable. And I now have since come to realize that the more you charge, the more accountable people are, and the more people show up and the right people
yeah.
show up, right? But it just kind of evolved over the last couple of years. And really, whether somebody is coming in with a business idea and wants to grow it, whether they already have a six-figure business and want to create another six-figure income to scale, or they're stuck at that like 80,000, 70,000, $80,000 mark, and they're like, I just can't get through it, because it's who you are that
Yeah.
builds your income, right? Like
Yep.
you can't be the same person at $50,000 that makes $500,000, and you can't be the same person at 500 that makes 2 million. You have
Yep.
to change and grow and adapt, and you have to also, a lot of the time, to scale really big, you know, to seven figures or beyond, or even multiple six figures, you need a team of people that are going to help you. And so often we think we have to do it ourselves, and this is why I wanted to create this lifestyle mentorship and show people you don't have to work until your fingers bleed. You don't have to give up
Mm,
everything in self-sacrifice. You don't have to do any of those things to build business. You need to learn how to work smart. You need to learn how a few moves can make the most money. And then you need to really sit in your zone of genius, like you've been able to do, you know, whether it was your financial background or now here with LinkedIn, how you're helping people. You as an entrepreneur get to choose. You get to choose what you learn. And so you can go after anything in this world that you want and make money doing it and find your people. And to me, that was something like that was absolutely so exciting, right? Because I started off working with a lot of network marketers that wanted to learn how to make the income that I was. But
mm,
now, I've been able to work with actresses, and I have an electrician as part of my mastermind. I've got coaching clients that are building coaching programs or courses, and it's
mm,
just like it's become this beautiful community of people that we all get to learn together. And for me, having that community of trust, whereas I didn't have a lot of people that were cheering me on and moving me forward, I didn't have a lot of people I could bounce ideas off of. And
mm,
so it just creating that environment for people where they can thrive, where they can learn, where they can grow, not feel silly for asking questions or feel stalled when they have a challenge. Like how many of us have sat in our own crap for years or
mm,
months and not actually progress forward? I remember, before I got into podcasting, it took me 2 years to put up a podcast. And when I realized how easy it was to actually put up a podcast, it took me 30 minutes and I
Yes.
procrastinated for 2 years, right? Like, so you start to realize if you were just that person that pours belief into other people and helps them overcome the challenges, that the results that they create on the other side, that's where the magic happens for me. Like the money is a bonus, but watching
Mhm.
people transform their lives
Yeah.
and live their dream life or live in their zone of genius and be able to help people that way and just like have their soul lit on fire every time they show up, like that's it for me.
Yeah. No, it's so true that you say that because it's so true. Like for me, it's always kind of been all about impact. I would say for me, like money was always just kind of the bonus, right? Like how you said, it just so happens to be kind of a byproduct of like success, of helping people, all these type of things. And what's so fascinating about that is it really at the end of the day, like it comes down to action, right? Like you talked about how you were challenged to make six figures in 30 days, and there's like so many people. I think like only 9 or 10% of people in the U.S. like make it in an entire year, and like you did it in 30
Wow.
days. Like it's pretty crazy to think about
I
how.
didn't. So I sorry, I got to stop you. I
Oh,
didn't the first time. The first challenge, I think I made $40,000 in that first challenge, but I was actually really. I never made that in a month before. So
that's
I was
good.
like, this
Yeah.
is pretty good, right? This is so I like it did. I sorry, I needed to correct you on that because I didn't
No.
make $100,000 that first month. But you start to learn how to create, business and environments where you can do those things, where you can scale to
Yeah.
that.
No, and that's what it's all about. I'm big on transparency because as you and I know, like when you get to a lot of these like circles, information can be so like skewed. People will give you the good and not tell you the bad.
Yeah.
So that's exactly why I love this show because like I talk to people like the to get to where I'm at. If I told you the price that I've had to pay, you probably wouldn't want to pay it, right?
Yep.
And it's it's interesting because the more that I train with people like who are elite in their field, you're always looking like what is like the secret, like what is the sauce, and they just tell you the same stuff that you already know. It's like, why did I have to pay this person this amount of money? Just to know that. And we got some more people that hopped in. Yusuke from Japan, so good to see you.
Cool.
This is why I love LinkedIn. You get to meet people from all over the world. And Laura hopped in. So good to see you, Laura. It's interesting, Christina, because we talked. I realized that we totally like miss over like this part that has been so influential, not only on your brand, but also like your experience, right? Like how you've pretty much spent most of your life in Canada and you moved to Mexico. Talk to us about kind of w- what was the whole reason behind that? Why did you do it? But also, like, did you kind of like foresee that as kind of the catalyst that created a lot of like your brands and movements that you have now? Or was it kind of just something that came from that decision or the choice?
Yeah, for every blessing is a curse, and every curse is a blessing. And that's a really. I'm so happy that you worded that question that way because it's a really good question. And so I'm going to be completely transparent with you and answer, bluntly and honestly. We were living in Canada, and I love to travel. And side note, when I was a little girl, I dreamed of being able to travel the world with my family and have different experiences and maybe live in different locations. I've always loved warm weather, right? We're coming to Canada. It's like cold, gray, wet for 9 months of the year, right? It can be really depressing. Actually, a lot of people have seasonal depression actually, and they have to take extra vitamin D just to get over it. And so this was back a couple of years ago, and we were in the middle of COVID, And COVID kind of changed everything for us. You know, my husband and I were trying to have another baby, and I'm now 5.5 months pregnant, which is really exciting. But we were trying, and in 2021, I had 2 miscarriages, and it was heartbreaking. Not only did I not have the medical care that I needed when I was there, and granted, it was in the middle of COVID and everything was weird, but we made some decisions in our health that, that really isolated us. You know, we decided at the time that we weren't going to get vaccinated because of some health issues that Ryan had, and because we were trying to get pregnant. I didn't know the long-term effects, and now all that stuff is coming out, and I'm just so grateful that we made certain decisions when we did. But we just felt like the walls were closing in on us, right? And I couldn't believe what was happening in Canada. I couldn't believe the division between people, or the commercials on TV that were like, "Ooh, Thanksgiving is coming. Like, make sure everybody that's coming is vaccinated, and if they're not, you don't invite them." Right? Like, it was just like, it was unbelievable what was happening, and I was just like, I can't live in this. I can't live in this environment where people are being turned against each other over fear. Which, by the way, in the beginning, I was also fearful. I was the person that was leaving my groceries out on the porch for 12 hours or whatever and washing them. Like, I get it. We all didn't know what was going on in the beginning, and I have so much
Yeah.
grace and compassion for everybody. I just really truly believe in medical freedom. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in freedom of movement. And
Mm.
so when you have a leader of a country saying you're going to close the borders to people that didn't comply to what they were demanding, I felt like, oh my God, the walls are closing in. Like, this is not who I am. My core values were being shaken, on top of
Mm.
postpartum, because nobody tells you get postpartum after a miscarriage too. And so my husband actually was the one that suggested it. He said, we decided that we were going to homeschool our daughter. We weren't happy with how school was going either, even though she was only in kindergarten for a couple of months. I'm like, we're not doing any of this. Like, I don't want any of this. She's so influential at this age. Like, I want to be the person influencing her, and she deserves to be a kid. She doesn't deserve to be a political pawn. She doesn't deserve to go through any of this crap. She deserves to live freely like a kid. And so my husband said, why don't we go to Mexico for 3 to 6 months? And I said, okay, start the car. Like, it was like that IKEA commercial, like, start the car. Like, I can't believe
Yeah.
you actually said that out loud, right? And so we made the decision very quickly within a couple of weeks to pack up our house, and just in case we Airbnb'd it, and flew down here with 8 suitcases. That was it. We had one suitcase was full of Christmas presents for Izzy. So 7 suitcases we lived out of for 8 months, and we decided, when we got here, the energy was different. We felt really good. We didn't realize how often we were making decisions based on what was expected of us
Mm.
versus what we actually wanted as a couple, as a family. And so it was really interesting because there was this huge shift. And within 2 months, we decided to burn the boats, which means that we decided to sell the house in Canada. We decided, okay, we're going to make this work for the next couple of years. We're going to see what happens. We end up buying a house down here that we're in the middle of building right now. And what was so fascinating is, as soon as we started living in alignment with who we were and our purpose, and started speaking our truth, which, by the way, I have a hard time saying our truth because I really believe that it's a collective, and like, you can be a total dick if you just say it's my truth and don't care about anybody else. So I'm not saying that at all, okay?
Mhm.
But when we started living life on our terms, on what we wanted, everything started to flow. It was incredible. Different job offers, different businesses, different people were reaching out. Videos were going viral. All of a sudden, we had all of this exposure because we'd done something courageous, I guess. But really, for us, it was life or death. It was like, either we stay and our mental health goes down the tube, or we move and we do something different. And we look at this as a family adventure. We look at this as an opportunity. Our daughter can learn Spanish. We can build business somewhere else. We can learn, we can grow, right? If you never put yourself in a difficult position, you'll never grow. And so, not to say that it hasn't been, that it's been sunshine and rainbows. Like, there's challenges all the time, right? I understand more Spanish than I speak. My daughter speaks better Spanish than I do now, and these pieces are something that I definitely want to work on and grow with.
Yeah.
But I was willing to put myself in a really uncomfortable position to do something different, something I dreamed of, even
Mm.
though it was scary, even though it was different, and it paid off, right? With big risk, you get big rewards. Most people just want little risk and
Yeah.
then massive rewards, but that's not how life works. So we put it all on the line and thought, you know what, let's burn the boats. Let's do something different. And it's paid off so well, and I'm just so grateful that we are able to do it as a family, because I understand a lot of people are not able to do that. I had a digital business. I could work anywhere in the world. My husband now does real estate down here. We just bought, I haven't even announced it yet, but I'll tell you on LinkedIn. We just bought you guys. So in the US, you call freezies otter pops, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we bought a boozy otter pop business. So we sell boozy freezies, boozy otter pops, which are a huge hit down here, right? Like everybody can't wait to get their hands on them. Ryan's in there right now making otter pops. And we just thought, what a cool opportunity to just, like, even if it's like something that we do for fun or we grow it, it's something that we can do with our daughter and say, like, look, this is how you start. These are the memories that we get to be role models for, right? And so
Yeah.
that, to me, that's so important, and everything's kind of just worked out. If you keep looking for solutions, you'll find them.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to say hello. We got more people that hopped in. Who's here? Oh, I believe I connected you both, but if you haven't, you definitely have to chat with Supermom Lachelle Atkins. Not
Yes.
sure if you heard Supermom, but Christina is having her second child. You're 5 months, right?
Yeah, 5.5 months. Yeah.
5.5, yeah. So I won't spoil the number of kids that she has now, but let me tell you, as a parent, she's somebody that you definitely have to have a conversation with. And
Excellent.
then we have an incredible mutual friend that you introduced me to. Elsa's here, so good to see you.
Yeah.
She's awesome. And
She's
who's
fabulous.
here? Jackie, my good friend, so good to see you. If you haven't, definitely connect with Christina. You'll have an incredible conversation. And oh, Jose's here. Yeah, incredible. I believe Jose is from Venezuela. So
Oh, cool.
he's in Texas now, though, I believe, but he's from Venezuela. Yeah. And oh, Elsa has a question before we move on. What did she say here? Do you ship to America your boozy auto?
No, you're gonna have to come visit us down here. And like we were actually talking about, if it goes really well, we could probably scale to Vegas or like New Orleans, where the liquor laws are a little more loose.
Yeah, for sure. And it is it is incredible, like hearing so many parts of your story, right? It reminds me of why storytelling is such a powerful tool, because hearing you talk about like when you left Canada was kind of like my reason for leaving Hawaii. Like I remember when I was networking with people, they were like, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "I was born and raised in Hawaii." They're like, "Well, why are you here?" Right? And
Why
it's
would
like,
you leave, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's what
everyone
they would
says
ask
that.
me.
Why would you leave?
Why would you leave? And then I was just like, well, there's there's so much more than just kind of the location aspect, right?
Yeah.
And that was like one of the things. A lot of people have such a different perception of Hawaii because it's like they go to visit, but I
Yeah.
lived there for like 20 plus years. And I mean, when you live in an island where you can go around the entire island in an hour, you can only kind of imagine what living there for 20 plus years would be like, right? And
Got it.
you and I talked about how we've always like wanted to like challenge ourselves and do different things. And it in many instances it was kind of that way in Hawaii. Like people live in the past, and a lot of just they weren't moving forward. And I'll give you an example of kind of like how behind Hawaii was. It wasn't until last year that they got a Chick-fil-A. So it used to kill me when I was there, and I would see all of these like commercials and stuff, and I'd be like, oh my god, we're not going to get this for probably another like 5 or 10 years. And it's just I just always felt like we were behind, right? And that was like one of the reasons that I love about the continental US is that there's just so much more opportunity because it's
Yeah.
bigger. You meet people from all over the world, all walks of life, and it's been an incredible experience. And I'm curious for you, right? We talked about investing in yourself a lot, personal development, kind of tell us more about your podcast. Like I know you mentioned you wanted to kind of do it for a while, but there was kind of a lot of like fear for you, and you're like, I don't know if I should do this. What really was the catalyst that kind of got you to want to do your podcast, and what was really kind of your whole intention for creating it?
Well, it was the techie side of it, right? Like I am not technologically inclined at all. And so I was really scared of like, how do I set this up? What if I come into roadblocks? Who am I going to ask for help? Like, I don't know how to do this, right? And what I've learned is that self-doubt is crushed by just taking action, by
Yep.
learning the skills that you need to do, right? And so I had started off in network marketing, and I didn't really know how to create content at the time. And so I was working with Ray Higdon, and he's like, just interview people that have had more success than you, interview people that interest you. And like, just like we're doing right now, having a really great conversation. I love this. I love doing this with people. I love getting to know them. I love hearing their
Yeah.
stories. Like, if you think people are boring, it's because you're a really bad listener, right? So, like,
Yeah.
I really
100%.
enjoy talking to a whole bunch of different people and learning from them and growing for them. And it wasn't until a few years back that again another mentor said to me, you got to have a podcast. And I was like, I don't know how to set it up. And she's like, here. And she sent me like the 5 steps it took to set up, and I was set up in half an hour. And I was like, oh, I already love doing this. Now I'm doing live interviews. I can just take the audio and have an evergreen content. And for the first few weeks I did go back and I took videos that I was really excited about, really great conversations, put those in as kind of the startup to my podcast. And now we've just grown it since then. And by the way, I can still do better, right? Like I know that I could work on my exposure. I know that I could work a lot more and bring in better guests and have higher quality people come in, and more people watching. Like there's always room for improvement. But it was that need and want to learn from other people who I really, they have impactful stories, or they could inspire people in my network, because not everyone is going to resonate with me. Not everyone's going to resonate with you, right? There are certain pieces of our story that they may resonate with, but if I could bring in other people and have them share those little things, whether their careers were similar or their life experiences or their upbringings, or maybe they've had, a divorce, or maybe they've got like one of my first podcasts, he went to jail and he never should have gone to jail. And he tells this incredible story about 14 years in jail that he never should have been there. And then now he comes, like, it's just unbelievable. Right. And so it's having these stories that not only do they inspire my audience, but they inspire me. They remind me I'm no different than everybody else, right? I'm not special, but I'm also not special. I'm somebody that can absolutely show up and add value to people's lives,
Yeah.
and change their lives and impact them in a positive way. And sometimes we need that reminding. Sometimes, by going to take action, it makes
Mhm.
me feel so much better than sitting and doing nothing, you know?
Yeah. No, and it's so true, because that's like one of, I can't remember who said it, but action is like the one thing that starves doubt. Like
Yeah.
when you're in action, and this has been kind of an interesting conversation for me, right? Because I've been doing a lot more research on like health and this whole mental health thing. And it's like when we're in action, oh, it's like we're not depressed anymore. Or it's like, oh, when we're in action, like a lot of these things that we feel like we have kind of just like disappear. So I'm really intrigued with like, is action kind of the solution, really, to a lot of our problems, which it probably is in many instances. And before I respond, I want to touch on a couple things here. So, Mary, she's your fellow Canadian. She says, brave and inspiring, waiting for the next vax rollout in Canada, hoping for knowledge and safety or sanity to come here. Oh,
Yeah, me too, Mary. Me too. Still
and
hoping.
then Elsa says, the thing we don't want to do is often the thing we have to do to be successful. And it's so true. Like when I meet with people all the time to like talk about LinkedIn and strategy, I'm like, have you shared your story? And they're like, no, I don't want to share it. And I always tell them, like, the thing that story that you don't want to share is the story that's going to change your life, right? And it's that was why, like, the quote for the show that I use all the time now is like, be more afraid of being nothing than being something. I
Yeah.
always remember that quote that Danelle gave me, and it comes up like every time when I don't think I want to do something. I remind myself, be more afraid of being nothing than being something. And this has been an incredible conversation. I was blown away when I actually like read your post that you did, kind of like sharing a good amount of your story, and I was like, wow, there's so much of that. And then we have this conversation, and I'm like, yeah, everything that she's saying I can relate to, right? And where I want to go next is this idea of I was really fascinated when because you were one of the people that I talked about kind of why I left behind my finance career to do this whole LinkedIn thing after I had, pretty much like figured out how to use LinkedIn for that. And it was really interesting because I had a lot of questions. Normally, I don't really have a lot of self doubt just because I've worked on myself a lot and I do a lot of internal work. But for some reason, this was one thing where I was like, oh, I don't know if I could do this, because the LinkedIn's been around for decades. And I joke with people like I've only been here a little over a year. And then before that, I had no idea what it was. And I was just like, that whole doubt thing got into me. But I was blown away last week when I was having a conversation with somebody who watched like one of these shows that I did. Right. And a lot of times we'll create things for ourselves, really. Like impossible equals impossible is really kind of has been the story of my life, really. Like that was a word that I heard my entire life growing up, and I just constantly would prove that impossible equals impossible. And these things that people told me that you couldn't do, I did. And I'm curious for you though, like for me, it was meeting this lady who had an incredible story, right? Like, as you know, I've been kind of branching out more on the social media platforms, not just LinkedIn. And I was speaking on an Instagram live, and there was maybe like, I don't know, 8 or 10 people. It's not like one of my main platforms. But I remind myself always that the only number that I care about is one, right? As long as everything that I do helps one person, then it was worth it for me. And when I had a conversation with this woman, I I was instantly kind of reminded, like she spent nearly her entire life, like so much abuse and trauma and just like incredible stuff, and you're just like, wow. But nobody knew who she was, right? And it kind of reminded me so much of how things were for me before I met Danelle. And she's like, you need to go be a speaker. You need to go do this and this. And she has this way of kind of really
Kicking you in the butt.
yeah, well, I don't know about kicking you in the butt, but it's like she really embeds it into you. Like it is important for you to be known, right? Like there's somebody out there that needs what you do. And I normally don't get emotional, but like I got like emotional in the conversation with her because I was like, in many instances, this is exactly why I created the show. And also that was why I decided to do what I did on LinkedIn, because I started seeing people be fulfilled by like sharing their stories, right? And then you see the trying to think of the word. You see kind of like the domino effect of you do
Yeah.
it and then somebody else does it and then you turn it into a business and you get to help people and all of these type of things. I'm curious for you. Like I know you talked about how you had Terry Peters, right? The guy that kind of changed
Good
everything in you
memory.
when you were younger. But have you had an experience like that like in your professional career? Like do you have an experience that was like so memorable and it's like, you're the reason why I kind of did what I did? I'm curious.
It happens now more often. Even a couple of days ago, for a long time, I didn't talk a lot about why we left Canada. I didn't talk a lot about, my beliefs and what's going on in education and health and government. I didn't talk about those things because what are we taught? Don't talk about sex, politics, and religion. Don't talk about any of those things, right? But they were something that I was like really, really passionate about because I want to keep my family together. I have really strong core values and beliefs, and I think that a lot of those things are being lost. And even last week, I had somebody reach out to me because she's having some issues after her jab, and I could connect her with somebody that I knew that can actually help her recover from that.
Mm,
And she said, you're the smartest person that I have on my Facebook feed, and I've known you for almost 20 years, and to watch what you've created is unbelievable. And she's like, I don't think you realize, I don't think that you realize the impact that you have on other people.
yeah.
And we don't realize that often. We just go about our day and we are who we are, and we take who we are for granted a lot of the time.
Mm,
And I think that a couple of years ago I realized that vulnerability piece, right? Like I
Yeah.
probably never would have talked about having miscarriages. I never would have talked about my belief system because it's so easy for people to target you and say negative things or to disagree with you, right? But I realized very quickly that my superpower was being able to connect with people through vulnerability. Brene
Mm,
Brown says, when you shine a light on shame, nobody can use it against you. And
yep.
so there are things in our lives that we're shameful of because we didn't handle them correctly, but we learn from them, right? And so I think that often we don't talk about these things, or people don't want to tell their story because they don't think that it's impactful. But everybody's story, if you really realize what people are going through on the inside, everybody's story
Mhm.
is impactful and it is important. And so over my career, like I've got a girl that was in my mastermind couple years ago, and she's an actress in the UK, and to see what she's built, like I was like, I will be there for your red carpet event. I will be there. Like, you've built this thing from the ground up. You're building a community for actors. You're helping people. You're growing them. And to watch what people do when you simply plant a seed, or when you
Mhm.
pour some belief in them, and when you say, hey, look, you can do this, to watch that unfold, like that's all I want, is a ripple effect, right? A ripple effect of impact. And if you're open and honest with people and help them along the way, that comes back tenfold to you,
Mhm.
because it's not just your ripple, it's their ripple, and the ripple out
Yeah.
from the people around them, and then the ripple out, right? So yeah, it happens now more so than ever that I get messages like that, and I do screenshot them and I put them in a little folder in my phone for the days that I get totally attacked and harassed on social media. And
Oh
then I
yeah.
like turn off that app and go to my phone, like where my pictures are, and like read through all the reasons that I continue to do this, and the reasons that get me out of bed in the morning. Because there are definitely those moments that I'm just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this. I don't know if I
Yeah.
want to do this, put myself out there all the time. Like maybe I
Yeah.
should just buy some storage units in a bowling alley and call it a day, right?
Yeah. It's so weird because like ever since I've been training with Danelle, like I've really had kind of this like emotional, like become master of your emotions essentially. Like
Yep.
that's one of the things that Danelle teaches you. And it's so interesting because like I always find myself kind of like stuck in the middle, right? It's like you get so many people that are like so negative that you're like positive, but then you also get the people who are kind of like in the middle and they're like, oh, you're just like toxic positivity. And I just hate all these like crazy words that people make up, but it's like it's so true, right? I remember, and it was funny when I started this whole LinkedIn thing. I tell people that I didn't have any testimonials because I really didn't, besides myself. But I was looking back on like my DMs one day, and I was like, oh, I'm like so silly. I had like hundreds of these things, right? It's just so many times like we don't really realize the impact that we have, or a lot of people kind of they they kind of just like pass by, right? Like you see it, but you don't actually see it until
Yep.
you sit and you say like, oh wow, like I did that, right? It's so cool for me to realize that when I started doing these events, there was like nobody like in my generation, like in these rooms. There really wasn't even a lot of men, honestly. Like I can count a handful. And now it's like when I go to these events, like more people are doing them, more people in my generation, and it's just like it's kind of interesting to see how when you really don't think that people are watching, somebody's always watching. And like one of my things is like always give people something to be inspired by, right? Like even if you're in like a downtime, be honest with people, but like talk about how you're going to overcome it, right? And one of the things that you talked about is that as long as we have the courage to just like keep going, and as long as you don't really kind of give up, a lot of these things that you think you'll figure out the solution, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious because obviously, right, Izzy has been she's incredible. Like getting to meet her and a lot of the things that she's been able to experience, I'm like, man, like I haven't even gotten to experience a lot of these things yet. But it's so cool that she gets to do that. I'm curious for you though, Christina, because there's a lot of parentpreneurs on LinkedIn, right? And I know that's a big part of your audience. it's interesting because Izzy's kind of like young enough to the point where you're actually in a position that a lot of parents aren't, where like you can kind of relate to the idea of like social media, right? Like most parents are like when they were younger, like they didn't really have social media. And then the kids, like when they were born, social media wasn't really out. Like for my generation, I wasn't really on like social media until I was like 13, 14. So it was like because Izzy is like to that point, how are you kind of like navigating social media with her? Because obviously you and I talk about it all the time, like with social media and how, especially for a lot of younger people, how negative a lot of these platforms are.
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts on like what advice would you share to like kind of parents about like social media and kids, and what are some of the strategies that you're doing?
Everybody's going to have a different opinion on this. Everybody's going to have different boundaries, different risk factors, all that kind of stuff. And for me, um, I didn't have my first social media account until 2008. So that's when I had my first like Facebook account. When I first got into business 7 years ago doing network marketing, I didn't even have an Instagram account. I had to start an Instagram account. So we didn't really use that much of it. Now it's like my whole life, but I'm also aware of the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah.
And my husband and I both have had this conversation. She's sitting on her iPad right now and she's watching, one of her shows, but we did get rid of like Netflix and Disney and all of these things because there's a lot of um, social manipulation in those videos
Yeah.
as well. And what's funny is like we actually pointed out to her, like we watched a Madagascar movie the other day by DreamWorks, and like it was about the penguins, and they're all like marching in line. They're like, we don't step out of line. We do everything that they tell us to do. We don't think outside the box, right? And so we would like make fun of it, and we'd like, isn't that silly, Izzy? Like would like make her question it, and have bigger conversations because I realized very early on that she understood and comprehended way more than we gave her credit for. So I started having adult conversations with her, like conversations like I would have with you, expectations that I would have with you if we worked together, right? Like I'm constantly saying, you choose happy or sad, like you get to choose that emotion. And so, we equip our kids for the world. And if we treat them like kids all the time, then they don't get to grow into that place where we can leave
Yeah.
them on their own to make good decisions. Now, when it comes to social media, both my husband and I, like one of her friends, for her 6th or 7th birthday, just got an iPhone. Not a chance. Like you're not getting an iPhone until you're at least 16, if not 18. We'll figure out. We'll like send smoke signals if we need to find you, but like you're not getting an iPhone. And I said until you can pay for it, until because I think that brings value, right? Like, of course, we could go out
Mhm.
and buy her whatever, but she's got to have value and she's got to learn the
Yeah.
responsibility of those things. We also need to educate her on all the things that could go wrong, right? Like, sometimes she'd
Mhm.
be like, well, why can't I watch that? Or why can't I be on there? Well, it's inappropriate for you to watch. Or there's some concepts there that are adult concepts, right? Same with swearing, by the way. Like, you'll notice that I swear once in a while. Try to do that not as often, but she knows that's an adult word, and she's like, yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
18 yet, so I can't say that word, right? And maybe she won't, maybe she will, right? But we both talked about it, and like I don't want her having any social media accounts until she knows who the heck she is, until
Mhm.
she's so solid in that, right? I teach her just like Danelle, right? Become unoffendable. I'm like, if your number one thing is you are unoffendable and nothing anybody else says bothers you, you will win at life over and over and over again. So I want her to have a very solid foundation of who
Mhm.
she is and what is important to her, what she'll tolerate, what she won't tolerate before she goes on social media. And then maybe we'll get into it. I mean, I just saw Matthew McConaughey, his son
Mhm.
for the first time is now on social media on Instagram, right? And I don't know how old he is, maybe 15 or 16, right? And so if you have the maturity to handle that,
Yeah.
then we can have the conversation about you paying for it, you bought, all those kind of things.
Mhm.
But that's really important to me. That's really, really important to me because I think that too often we rush our kids into growing up and we
Yeah.
skip the part of the serious just like drugs. Like, what are you going to do when it comes to
Mhm.
drugs and alcohol? Well, you know what? She may see us drink alcohol, right? But like we all know alcohol is toxic. So I'm going to educate you on why adults, you see us have fun and have a couple of drinks here and there, but like here are all the bad things that can happen, Okay. And if you know all those bad things and you make the choice to do it once in a while or with friends or in a safe environment, then that's okay. Right. But we have to educate our kids instead of saying, no, you can't, no, you can't. I mean, I asked my mom when I was in university, I think it was in like fourth year university. And I said, all of my friends have done drugs, like all of them. And I've never done drugs. And I don't understand what made me different than all of them. And she said, I never told you you couldn't. I told you what would happen or what could happen. And especially nowadays with like the whole fentanyl crisis, right? So,
Mm,
like, especially now, like you're playing Russian roulette every time you try something like that.
yep.
And so we need to educate our kids. And I feel the exact same way about social media. We need to educate them until they have a good understanding of child predators. They have a good understanding that the person on the other side of that may not be who they say they are. And
Yep.
and that comprehension comes at different ages, different levels. And until I'm comfortable that she understands that, there will be no social media.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything that you said, and it's funny how there's like so many similarities here. But like, that was one of the things for me was like my dad was a drug addict, so I've never done like any type of drugs,
Yeah.
cigarettes, nothing. And I remember like it was such an awkward thing because you were like the only one, like everybody
Yeah.
else was doing it, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. I guess it's fitting that the community that I joined is called the Outlier Project because I've been an outlier my entire life. But no, I completely agree with everything that you said, right? And there is a lot of manipulation. It's people
It's not
don't,
real.
yeah, people don't realize that like they're, and a lot of the adults really probably don't even notice it because their minds have already been like kind of trained from when they were younger, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a reason why we don't use a lot of the stuff that they teach us in school, right? It really is awareness is key. I remember I was reading an old post that I wrote and I was like, courage is my superpower. But now that I really think about it, the ultimate superpower is really like this idea of self-awareness, right? When
Yeah.
you're aware of your surroundings, when you're aware of like kind of what people are trying to do, really what's going on, and like actually like opening your eyes and like seeing things in the world, it changes the lens and the perspective that you're able to look at things. And this has been an incredible conversation. This has been so fun, Christina. It's always great to chat with you, and I know we'll be headed to a retreat soon, so we'll be able to meet again. We'll have to get a picture though. I don't believe we got a picture
Oh, what?
the, the last time. Well, we had kind of like like a group photo and stuff, but I before we go. I just want to say thank you so much and acknowledge some people. Lance is here. My good friend Damien. Where are we here? Oh, Lance, thank you, my friend. Yeah, these events they've been really fun. I didn't realize how impactful they were. I just did them because I wanted to have conversations, and it turned out that what's good for you ends up becoming good for a lot of other people. And this is what is this? This is a powerful one. Courageous creativity. Even if your
Mhm.
content is only view a select few, it was perfect timing for them. Sometimes virality is conformity. Yeah. Ironic that I wrote a post that says going viral is overrated on LinkedIn, and that one was the one that went
That
viral.
went viral? That's hilarious.
Yeah. And it's funny how it's like Lance says, I don't have an Instagram or YouTube channel either. And Elizabeth says the same thing. I want to touch on that point because this was kind of like my belief, right? I was all in on LinkedIn, and I didn't realize how in many instances that was a limiting belief for me because it's not about the platform, it's about the people. Right,
Mhm.
you're gonna go on every platform and you're gonna meet people. Like if it wasn't for Facebook, I probably wouldn't have met my mentor mom Janelle Delgado, or like Instagram. Like I really don't use those two platforms, but that's really why I haven't deleted it, honestly, because then I was like, well, that's how I like to communicate. So open that. But just opening opportunities and kind of being open minded. I find that truth is another really powerful tool. And so many times we think that we're telling ourselves the truth, but we're really not because we want to be comfortable.
Sure.
And I love what you said about getting comfortable being uncomfortable because that was my theme for last year. But this has been an amazing conversation, Christina. Looking forward to another epic year in our mastermind. Before we go, I will hand the mic to you. Anything that you want to share, anything that you want to promote, the floor is yours, and I'm sure we will be collaborating again.
That's so kind, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. And I had that limiting belief too that I could only do Facebook and then only do Instagram. And I just learned how to repurpose all of my content. And some I do better than others, right? Like some I've got room to grow on. So keep putting that stuff out there because there are people that you're impacting every single day. I have a free workshop starting on Monday that you can, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, the sign up link is there, and it's called Life on Your Terms. Right? We're going to go over the financial piece of, because most people, I asked a question in my group the other day, and you're a pro at this, so I should probably have you come in and talk. But I asked, if you had $5,000 dropped into your account right now, what would you do? And 90% of the people said that they would pay off debt. And that tells me what's going on in the world right now, right? People are over leveraged. It's extremely expensive to live right now in North America. And I think that we really have to start educating ourselves financially on that kind of stuff and really take full responsibility of it. My husband and I went debt free a couple of years ago and, never looked back, because that to us is freedom, right? Having options is having freedom, and we're willing to work hard to continue to have those options. But I really wanted to bring to light that anybody has the ability to change their life in 6 to 12 months. Anybody has the ability to move anywhere, create another stream of income, take little steps daily towards what they want and change the way that they live. And you're not stuck, right? Just like we weren't stuck in Canada. I wasn't stuck in my job as a hairstylist. I wasn't stuck in my small town way back then. Actually, Terry Peters might even watch this because he's a LinkedIn guy, right? So who knows? He might even catch this. But all of those pieces lead us to who we're becoming. And I think that, so often we beat ourselves up about the adversity that we face, or I'm not cut out for this. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not, whatever it is. And those are the pieces that got us here. All of those challenges that we overcame got us here. The good, the bad, the ugly, all of those things contributed to who we become as human beings and how we show up for the rest of the world. So that's where I would lead them right now. And if you want to have a bigger conversation on LinkedIn and you want to collaborate, please feel free to reach out. I'm always looking for podcast guests as well. And I just really want to thank you, Paul, for having me today and having a really epic conversation. I'd love to come back and do this again with you. I appreciate you sharing me with your audience, and I'll do the same for you, of course, because I'd like to have you on my podcast as well, and for you to share your story, because it's a powerful one where people often think, well, I wasn't born with money. I don't have any money. I don't have any options. But you went out there and you created them. And I think that if more people had that attitude and had that belief in themselves, then we'd have a lot more victors in this world than victims that we're looking to blame and shame and be critical, right? I just want to be in the ring with other people that want to do the same thing. So thank you again for having me.
Oh, absolutely, Christina. Yeah, we'll definitely be in touch. Because have you done one of the audio events yet on LinkedIn? Have you done
No,
one?
I haven't done that yet, but I will.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say we can definitely do one. That'll be fun. People
Okay,
actually get to like come up on stage and like interact. You get to hear their voice. You get to see everybody in the room, so it's not just like
cool.
scrolling comments. Yeah, we'll definitely do one. And Damien, thank you, my friend. I have a lot of epic people. It's really what it is. You do a great job as a host of highlighting your
You
guests.
do, absolutely.
This has been fun for me. Like I get to meet so many incredible people who have incredible stories, and it's just like anything that I can do to like help other people, right? Like give them the launch pad that I didn't have when it comes to LinkedIn. And we really are one connection away from a completely different life, right?
Yep.
And this has been so fun. So don't leave, Christina, but I'm going to end the
Okay.
stream. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. um Please, if you haven't, go connect. Don't follow Christina. Go connect with her, because she's definitely somebody you need to have in your network. She'd be an incredible asset for you. And we will see you next week for Impossible Equals Impossible. Have a good